In a moment no one expected, a deeply moving scene unfolded on live television. Hollywood icon Samuel Jackson was reduced to tears after reading a letter from African leader Ibrahim Traoré. What did the letter say? Why did it strike such a powerful chord? The segment quickly captured global attention. Raw, human, unforgettable. It started like any other Wednesday in Los Angeles. Samuel was prepping for a daytime talk show. Fresh coffee, bullet points, his calm, charismatic self. But something felt off. Moments before his cue, a quiet assistant slipped him an envelope. This just Convergent International. The envelope had foreign handwriting, bold and graceful. Curious, he flipped it. It was from Burkina Faso. He slowly broke the seal. Inside, carefully folded, was a letter. The paper was plain, the signature in blue ink. The name at the bottom made him freeze. Ibrahim Traoré. Samuel's pulse jumped. He didn't know the man, not personally. Why would a president write him? He scanned the first line and stopped. Something stirred deep inside. His fingers shook. No way, he whispered. Then came the voice, live in 60 seconds. He tucked the letter into his coat, stood tall, and stepped into the lights, unaware that soon the world would see him cry. The show opened with smiles, applause, and Samuel's usual charm. He chatted about his latest role, his love for blues, his path from Broadway to the big screen. But his eyes kept returning to the envelope. Then, with a grin, the host said, "Sam, I heard you got a letter that nearly made you cancel today from a president?" the host said with a smirk. The audience chuckled. Samuel gave a half smile, quiet and reflective. "Yeah," he said, voice low. "From a man named Ibrahim Traoré, president of Burkina Faso. I don't know him, but this got to me." He reached into his coat and pulled it out. The studio hushed. Samuel opened the letter. He began to read. His voice was steady at first. Then came a break. A slight shake in his hands. The laughter died. "I never knew my father," he read, "but your strength, your fire, your fight for black dignity on screen made young men like me believe in our own voice." The words trembled out. Samuel paused. Tear welled. He looked away, inhaled deep. The audience leaned forward. The cameras rolled tighter. He wrote. Samuel continued, softer now, that watching me helped him hold on to his identity when the world tried to erase it. The silence in the room deepened. Not a shuffle, not a cough, just breathless stillness. At home, the same viewers stared. Food forgotten, phones silent. He kept reading. "You never knew the weight you carried for us. But every time you refused to bow, you spoke for Africa's lost sons." A tear rolled down. Samuel wiped it. "This isn't a letter," he whispered. "It's a mirror. A message from a brother I never met." Even the host, usually quick with a comeback, said nothing. Eyes wet, head bowed. The audience? What? Tissue. Boxes were passed. Even the cameraman's hand shook. And just like that, one letter turned a legendary actor into something more, a vessel of memory, of honor, of kinship. But no one knew what that letter would set in motion. No one could have predicted. Days later, backstage after the broadcast, Samuel sat alone in his dressing room. The letter rested in his hands. His head bowed. He kept rereading one line again and again. "There was a time I felt invisible, like I didn't matter. But your voice made me feel seen." This wasn't a fan note. It was a story. Traore had written of his boyhood growing up under French colonial systems, where Africa's past was erased from blackboards and black heroes didn't exist. "They taught me my skin was a mistake," the letter read. "But your films, they made me question that lie." Samuel wiped his face and whispered, "This ain't about movies, it's about legacy." Just then, his publicist burst in, breathless. "Samuel, it's everywhere." The clip went viral. People are in tears. Celebrities reposted it. CNN looped it on air. But Samuel didn't flinch. This wasn't about headlines or hashtags. His heart stayed with the boy who once had no voice and the man who now led a nation. That night, he couldn't sleep. He turned and turned, the letter glowing faintly beside his bed. At exactly 2:14 a.m., he stood up, went to the kitchen, picked up the phone, and made a call he never thought he would. "This is Samuel L. Jackson. Can I speak with the president of Burkina Faso?" The woman laughed politely. Sir. It doesn't quite work like that." But 3 hours later, his phone lit up. "Mr. Jackson," the voice said, calm and kind. "This is President Ibrahim Traoré." "I didn't expect you to respond." Samuel breathed deep. "You didn't just write to me," he said. "You opened something in me I hadn't touched in years," Samuel said softly. There was a pause. Then Traoré replied, "We all carry scars, brother. Mine came from silence, yours from the screen. I saw your pain between the lines. That's why I wrote you." For 42 minutes, they spoke two lives, two worlds apart, joined by a wound and a shared flame to transform that wound into purpose. When the call ended, Samuel sat still, lights off, staring out the window. His mind slipped into the past Chattanooga, Tennessee, the sting of slurs, bottles thrown like hate in glass form, his mother's arms shaking as she shielded him. Remembered sneaking to watch Malcolm X's speeches on grainy tapes, afraid of his own rage, of what would happen if he ever let it out. Now, decades later, a president had told him that rage had saved a life. "You turned fire into film," Traoré had said, "and your film gave me the strength to lead." Samuel felt something shift inside, not sadness, something deeper, a hidden ache finally breaking free. For the first time in years, he wept. Not for cameras, not for applause, but in truth, stillness. Alone, by sunrise, Samuel made up his mind. This wasn't just a letter, it was a legacy. A tale that had to be told, not as clickbait, not as spectacle, but as soul, as witness. As a bond between two black men carrying each other's voice across the sea, and that morning, the world began to listen.
Ow.
The footage of the broadcast flooded every corner of the internet. That close-up Samuel's tear-streaked face, his voice cracking, the silence that swallowed the room was everywhere. Twitter blazed, Samuel L. Jackson crying over a letter from an African president. This is not TV, this is truth. Young black artists filmed their reactions. Grandmothers in Ghana, aunties in Atlanta, elders in Nairobi, fans in Brazil, they all shared the clip. Everyone had the same question. What else did that letter say? Overwhelmed, Samuel called his agent. "Tell the network I want to finish the letter live." No teleprompter, just me and the words. The agent paused. "You sure?" "I've never been more sure," Samuel said. The world deserves to hear it all. But halfway across the globe, in a quiet room in Ouagadougou, President Traoré sat by his window, sunlight spilling in, wondering if he'd exposed too much of his soul. Just hours before the second reading aired, Samuel got a message from Traoré. "Be gentle with my truth, brother. It still trembles inside me." That line stayed with him. The second half of the letter didn't speak of politics. It bled with memory. Traoré wrote of the night his closest friend, Madu, vanished during a protest. How soldiers dragged boys like broken chairs. How their cries still chased him in sleep. "That was the moment I learned silence is violent," the letter read. "So I spoke, even knowing the price." Samuel whispered those words aloud in rehearsal. No one spoke. Even the cameraman looked away, blinking fast. As the network finalized the segment, Samuel stood near the stage and murmured, "This story, it's not about Africa. It's about all of us." Traoré's truth had become more than testimony. It had become a mirror.
Ow.
And the world could know. Longer look away. That night, screens flickered across Detroit, Lagos, Accra, and Paris. People gathered in couches, at cafes under streetlight projectors. In the studio, under a single warm spotlight, Samuel sat still. No applause, no intro, just breathless quiet. Then, finally, he began, "Dear Samuel, I never knew your name. Until I watched A Time to Kill, I didn't understand what your pain looked like, I didn't know the weight of your tears until I saw them fall. And I didn't see myself truly until you stood there, unbending, refusing to shrink. Samuel paused, lifted his head, and then read on. As black men, we carry so much, the letter said, but no one ever shows us how to mourn. Fury, it continued, taught me to lead with compassion. Your flame taught me to rise, even while burning. Tears streamed freely down Samuel's face as he reached the end. If I've led my people with courage, Traore wrote, it's because someone like you once screamed when silence was safer. And the studio didn't clap. No applause, just silence. Deep, thick silence. The kind that only visits when truth lands squarely in the center of the soul. And in that stillness, something shifted. The world realized this wasn't just a note. It was ancestry, whispering its way into the hearts of those long overlooked. The morning after, Samuel's phone rang again. Unknown number. A go bit of feeling made him answer. I didn't think you'd read it all, came a warm, humble voice. It was Traore. I couldn't stop, Samuel replied. You didn't send me words. You sent me a reflection. Silence followed, not awkward, just full. I wrote it, Traore said gently, because I made a vow. To the boy I used to be, to Madhu, to every voice this world decided not to. Here, Samuel's grip on the phone tightened. You've lived through fire, haven't you? Traore exhaled a soft chuckle. Hell, he said, isn't heat sits the silence when people watch you suffer? Then, even softer. But heaven might just be the moment someone truly listens. And that night, Samuel picked up a pen and began to write his own. Not a performance, but a response. Samuel picked up the phone. Next episode, he told his producer, I'm reading my own letter. When the day came, millions tuned in. It's time. The studio was stripped down. No fancy lights. No music cues. No stage props. Just Samuel. A single spotlight. And a folded letter resting in his hand. He began, Dear President Traore, I have played warriors. I have worn crowns. I've shouted lines that shook cinema walls. But nothing prepared me to speak your pain. He stopped, looked into the lens. You didn't write to impress. You wrote because silence became too heavy to carry. And I heard you. I heard Madhu's voice. I heard your quiet. And I felt the fire it gave you. His voice cracked, but he kept going. I wish I had known your story sooner. I wish the world. Head, you're more than a president. You're living proof. I see you, brother. I see you. When he finished, the studio froze. A full minute passed. No applause, no breath. Just hearts wide open. Around the globe, living rooms echoed the same stillness. This wasn't a broadcast. It was bomb. Just a week before, in a remote camp near Fata Ngorma, Traore had embraced a sobbing child who'd lost his parents. The boy had asked, Are you the president? And Traore had whispered today, I'm just someone who hears. That moment was never meant for the public, but someone leaked the clip. And now, it aired beside Samuel's voice. No commentary. Just an image, dusty knees, open arms, shared tears. Twitter exploded, Instagram overflowed. And in places from Dar es Salaam to DC, strangers whispered truths they hadn't dared say before. This is what the world needs. This is leadership. Rewrite. All paragraph with same length. We never knew his story, ever asked why. But now, because of a letter and a single tear, the world had begun to listen. And for the first time, the name Ibrahim Traoré wasn't just trending, it was being remembered. That evening, Samuel sat alone again, the letter in his lap, his fingers tracing its edges. One line refused to leave his thoughts. She died holding my hand, not asking for help, but asking me to remember. Attached to the letter had been a photo, faded, blurry, black and white. A woman on a mat, her eyes closed, her face lined with struggle but at peace. On the back, in simple ink, it read, My mother, Fatou Traoré. And beneath it, she believed dignity was worth more than gold. Samuel showed the photo live. The crowd fell into hush. Then he shared what few knew: Fatou died in a hospital with no electricity. She gave up her treatment because supplies were limited. She told the doctors to give them to a child instead. She chose to die so someone else could live. The tears in the studio were real, but they were no longer just sad. They were righteous, awakened. The next morning, Samuel's phone wouldn't stop ringing. Calls from celebrities, lawmakers, African presidents. A legendary filmmaker said, This is the story we should be telling on screen," the U.S. Senator confessed. "Why didn't we ever hear this before?" But the most unexpected call came from a nurse in Burkina Faso. "I was with Fatou that night," she said, her voice shaking. She held my hand and smiled. "My son will not mourn me," she said. "He will rise for many." The line went quiet. Samuel was sobbing. That night, hashtags like #WittyYCU and #TraoreRuth surged online. Even school children began drawing Ibrahim and his mother. The world wasn't just watching now. Just watching, they were feeling, connecting, awakening. On the 5th day, moments before going live again, Samuel received an unexpected video message. Alone in his dressing room, he tapped play. On screen appeared President Traore, seated calmly, eyes locked with the camera. "Brother Samuel," he began, voice steady but full. "Thank you. I never imagined a man from Hollywood would carry my mother's memory like it was his own." He paused, blinked slowly, emotion rising. "You know what broke me most as a child?" he continued. "It wasn't the hunger, wasn't the fear. It was seeing the world walk past our panas as if we were invisible." He leaned closer. "But now, they see us." The video ended. Samuel sat there, hands folded, heart full. And for the first time in his entire career, he tossed his script aside. He stepped onto the set, faced the lens, and said just 3 words, "We see you." The screen faded to black. The internet lit up. That night, a new segment aired, The Letter That Shook the World. But just before showtime, a courier arrived. A young man from Burkina Faso, hand-delivering a package. Inside, 3 letters from orphans in a village deep in the country. One letter was signed with a smudge of a fingerprint and a child's drawing of a mango tree. "Mr. Jackson," it read, "we saw your tears. We cry too. Not because we are weak, but because someone finally looked our way." Second letter said, "Please tell your people our lives are not too small to count." Third, "We are the seeds Fatou Traore planted. Tell the world we are growing." That night, Samuel walked on stage, held the letters in the air, and declared, "These children, they wrote tonight's script." He never used the teleprompter again. And by the 6th day, something no one imagined began. Presidents, poets, actors, students, elders all joined what would become called the Fatou movement. Not a campaign, not a fundraiser, but something far deeper. Just truth spoken softly, yet heard around the world. Videos poured onto social media, people reading the letter aloud in schools, churches, mosques, living rooms. A mother in South Korea wept as she held her daughter. A soldier in Ukraine murmured the words while crouched in a muddy trench. Samuel shared a photo of the original letter on Instagram with the caption, "The most powerful lines I've ever read didn't come from a script, but from the soul of a people." Across continents, across languages, a phrase echoed again and again. "I see you, Ibrahim. See you, Fatou. And I see myself in your story." The final broadcast of the week was stripped bare. No lights, no music. Just silence for 2 full minutes. Images appeared slowly. Barefoot children grinning in a Burkina Faso village. A woman stirring a pot beside a smoky fire. A nurse crossing a dirt path with nothing but a flashlight. Then Samuel appeared. No suit, no glamour, just a man still. He opened his mouth, but no words came, only tears. Fatou died with honor. Ibrahim rose with meaning. "And we are different now because of them," he whispered. "We create fiction in Hollywood, but this was truth." The show closed with one final message, filmed at dawn. Traore stood in golden light. "To those who feel unseen, unheard, unloved, I was you, and yet I lead." It's not to be celebrated, but to remind the world. Africa is not a shadow. We are the voice. Fade to black. Then text appeared. "If this story moved you, don't just watch, respond. If it cracked your heart wide open, let it be known. Like, so the message reaches further. Comment for President Traore, for Mama Fatou, for anyone who needs to be seen. And subscribe because stories like this need a home.